Section 1. A decisive confrontation, introducing Operation Medusa. Operation Medusa was a pivotal military operation in the ongoing Afghanistan war. It unfolded in the Panjwai district of Kandahar province, a volatile region in southern Afghanistan. The operation was launched by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, in the fall of 2006. Its primary objective was to dislodge the resurgent Taliban forces that had gained a foothold in the region. The Taliban posed a significant threat to the stability of Afghanistan. They aimed to topple the Afghan government and disrupt the rebuilding efforts supported by the international community. Operation Medusa was a critical test for NATO forces. It was one of the largest offensives undertaken since the alliance's intervention in Afghanistan in 2001. The operation was primarily led by Canadian and Afghan forces, with support from American, British and Dutch units. The Taliban, known for their guerrilla tactics and knowledge of the terrain, presented a formidable challenge. The outcome of Operation Medusa had significant implications for the future of Afghanistan. The operation's success was crucial for maintaining security in Kandahar province, a strategic region vital for the Afghan government's stability. Operation Medusa was not merely a military campaign, it represented a critical juncture in the international effort to stabilize Afghanistan and prevent it from becoming a safe haven for terrorism. The operation's outcome would shape the dynamics of the conflict. It would also have a lasting impact on the lives of the Afghan people. Section 2. The players and the battlefield setting the stage for Operation Medusa. The arid plains and rugged terrain of Panjwai district in Kandahar province served as the battleground for Operation Medusa. This region, characterized by its harsh environment and scattered villages, held strategic significance for both NATO and the Taliban. For NATO, securing Panjwai was essential to prevent the Taliban from launching attacks on the provincial capital, Kandahar city. The Taliban, deeply entrenched in the local population, sought to control Panjwai to undermine the Afghan government's authority and maintain their influence. The Canadian Armed Forces, renowned for their combat experience and professionalism, were tasked with leading Operation Medusa. Canadian troops, deployed thousands of miles from home, were thrust into a complex and dangerous environment. They faced a determined enemy fighting on familiar ground. Alongside the Canadians were Afghan National Army soldiers. These Afghan troops were essential for their local knowledge and their role in rebuilding their nation. Supporting the Canadian and Afghan forces were American, British and Dutch units, providing crucial air power, logistics and intelligence. This multinational force, united under the NATO banner, aimed to deliver a decisive blow to the Taliban insurgency. The stakes were high for all parties involved. The outcome of the operation would determine the balance of power in Kandahar province. It would also have broader implications for the future of the NATO mission in Afghanistan. Section 3. Early trials and tribulations. The Canadian forces under fire. As Operation Medusa commenced, Canadian troops encountered fierce resistance from Taliban fighters. The Taliban, adept at guerrilla warfare, used hit-and-run tactics and improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, to inflict casualties and slow the Canadian advance. The rugged terrain of Panjwai, with its sparse vegetation and limited cover, made it challenging for Canadian forces to maneuver and engage the enemy effectively. Communication difficulties and logistical challenges further compounded the difficulties faced by the Canadian troops. Despite these obstacles, Canadian soldiers displayed courage and resilience in the face of danger. They fought valiantly, relying on their training, teamwork and technological superiority to gain ground against the Taliban. However, the cost of these early engagements was high. Several Canadian soldiers were killed or wounded, highlighting the risks and sacrifices inherent in such a demanding mission. The early casualties served as a stark reminder of the human cost of the conflict in Afghanistan. The loss of life weighed heavily on the minds of the Canadian soldiers, but it also strengthened their resolve to succeed in their mission. The sacrifices made by these soldiers underscored the importance of achieving their objectives. They were determined to honor the memory of their fallen comrades by bringing stability to Panjwai and denying the Taliban a safe haven. Section 4. A deluge of firepower, NATO's air campaign and its ramifications. To support the ground offensive and break the Taliban's resistance, NATO unleashed a massive air campaign over Panjwai district. Fighter jets, bombers and attack helicopters pounded Taliban positions, utilizing precision-guided munitions to minimize collateral damage. The overwhelming firepower inflicted significant casualties on the Taliban and disrupted their command and control networks. The air campaign proved instrumental in weakening the Taliban's defenses and creating opportunities for NATO ground forces to advance. However, the air campaign was not without its drawbacks and controversies. Despite efforts to avoid civilian casualties, the intense bombardment resulted in unintended civilian deaths and injuries. The accidental killing of innocent civilians strained relations between NATO and the Afghan population. It also fueled anti-Western sentiment and provided propaganda opportunities for the Taliban. The destruction caused by the air campaign, while targeting Taliban infrastructure and fighting positions, also inflicted damage on civilian homes, farms and businesses. This collateral damage had a devastating impact on the livelihoods of ordinary Afghans. It exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in the region. The air campaign, while militarily effective, underscored the complexities and moral dilemmas inherent in modern warfare. It highlighted the challenges of balancing military objectives with the imperative to protect civilian lives and minimize suffering. Section 5. Turning the tide, a shift in tactics yields results for NATO. Faced with the initial setbacks and recognizing the limitations of conventional warfare against a determined insurgency, Canadian commanders implemented a crucial shift in tactics. They adopted a more nuanced approach, emphasizing counter-insurgency principles and prioritizing the protection of civilians. Canadian troops increased their engagement with local communities, working to build trust and win over the population. They focused on providing security, delivering humanitarian aid, and supporting reconstruction efforts to demonstrate their commitment to improving the lives of ordinary Afghans. This change in strategy proved effective in undermining the Taliban's influence and isolating them from their support base. By addressing the needs of the local population and demonstrating their commitment to stability, Canadian forces gained the trust and cooperation of many Afghans. This shift in tactics, combined with the continued air campaign, allowed NATO forces to gain the upper hand in the battle for Panjwai. The Taliban, facing mounting casualties and dwindling support, began to withdraw from the area, melting back into the shadows to regroup and plan future attacks. By the end of September 2006, NATO declared Operation Medusa a success, having driven the Taliban out of Panjwai and securing a strategic victory. The operation demonstrated the adaptability and effectiveness of NATO forces, as well as the importance of a comprehensive approach to counter-insurgency operations. However, the victory came at a cost, both in terms of military and civilian casualties, and the long-term implications of the operation remained uncertain. Section 6. A victory marred by tragedy, the human cost of Operation Medusa. While Operation Medusa resulted in a tactical victory for NATO forces, it came at a heavy price. The intense fighting and the extensive use of air power exacted a toll on both combatants and civilians alike. Hundreds of Taliban fighters were killed during the operation, disrupting their networks and weakening their hold on Panjwai district. However, the conflict also claimed the lives of dozens of Afghan civilians caught in the crossfire or killed in accidental airstrikes. The civilian casualties, a tragic consequence of the fog of war, sparked outrage and condemnation from the Afghan government and international humanitarian organizations. The loss of innocent lives underscored the devastating impact of the conflict on the Afghan people and the challenges of conducting military operations in densely populated areas. The civilian casualties also served as a propaganda victory for the Taliban, who exploited the deaths to rally support and discredit NATO forces. The human cost of Operation Medusa extended beyond the immediate casualties. The fighting displaced thousands of Afghan families, forcing them to flee their homes and seek refuge in makeshift camps or with relatives in other parts of the country. The displacement exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, straining already limited resources and creating new challenges for aid organizations. The operation's impact on the civilian population highlighted the complex and enduring consequences of war. even in the aftermath of a military victory.